Yes, hello everyone. You are welcome to another video session of Python for All. In this video, I will talk about understanding Python built-in functions. We will look at the Lambda function, map function, the filter function, and lastly, the zip function. Let's start with the first one, which is a Lambda function. In my previous video, I have defined Lambda function as an anonymous function. So lambda function begins with the lambda keyword followed by the arguments, then a colon, and the expression to be evaluated. For example, you have cubes equals lambda x, and the expression to be evaluated is x cubed. Let's run this first cell first. Let's run the first cell to see the output of the results. So if I run this first cell, and then I have cubes already in my namespace. So what is the cube of 2? Cubes of 2. The cubes of 2 gives 8. Exactly. Cubes of 2 or 2 cube is actually 8. Let's look at another example. Here we define the lambda function add. Here I'm adding two different variables. So I have lambda x comma y, a colon, and then the expression to be evaluated, which is the sum of two uh, variables or two numbers. So I run this cell again. I have add already now in my namespace. Then I call add of 3 and 20. So if I call the add of 3 and 20, running the cell, it gives me 23. So it's the sum of two numbers. So lambda function can be used to simplify codes. For example, if I have a list of numbers which is assigned to number, then I can simply filter that list of numbers to how to get the even numbers. If you want to filter odd numbers, you can as well filter odd numbers. If you want to filter prime numbers, you can filter prime numbers. Now, instead of writing a loop for this, what we simply do is first of all to define the lambda function and then apply the filter function here. Yeah, fine. We have not talked about filter function, but we'll see that very shortly. Call the filter function on the lambda function and the number itself that you want to filter, which is the list. Then if you stop there, what it gives you is what is a filter expression. Okay, so you need to call a list on it to see the output. Now let's run this example. I have a number 2, 4, 5 until 15, and then I call first I'm calling here lambda, which is a lambda function. Lambda, I want the x modulo 2 to be equal to 0. Now what I want it, anything x is divisible by 2, returning no remainder, which means it's even. Okay, so that's the lambda expression. Then I filter this lambda expression and what number, what do I want to filter? So which container or which data type or which object, yeah, let me use the word object better put, which object do I want to apply this lambda functions to? The object is number, num. Okay, the object is num, num, as defined in my example, num. Then if I filter it and leave it there, if I print that filter alone, what it gives me is a filter expression. So I call a list on it, so that if I run this cell, what do I have? If I run this particular cell, it gives me a filters. Can you see it has filtered even numbers? If, for example, I remove this list here and I don't call a list on it, again, let's see what it gives us. If you run it, like I told you earlier, it gives you a filter expression. If I run it, what result does it give me? So it gives us filter object. That's the filter expression. So if you want the result, you can otherwise call print list of even numbers here. That's another way of doing it. If you call list of even numbers, it gives you the results. So or that's another way of doing it. Or you can call it originally, directly by calling list on the filter of the lambda expression. So here we have used to simplify very complex expression of trying to filter even number from a list of numbers. So I run it again. I still have the same result. Next, we'll talk about map. The map function applies a function to each element of an iterable and returns a new iterable with the results. Now, the iterable can be a list, a tuple, string, or any other iterable object. It takes two arguments. Okay, one is the function. Okay, the first argument it takes is function, a function that takes one element of the iterable as input and returns a value. And the second argument it takes is the iterable object that you want to apply the function to. So what map simply does is that it applies a function. Okay, you're applying a function to each element of an iterable. Let's see an example. Now we have a function here which is square of numbers. Okay, here I want to return the square of numbers. That's the doc string there, and then it returns num squared. So here you can decide to write this as a lambda expression, but like we said earlier, do not use lambda expression excessively in Python. So we define this function. Okay. Alternatively, you can also define it as a lambda expression. You get the same result. It doesn't actually affect your result, but it's advisable to limit the use of lambda expressions. So here we have the function. I'll run this function to have the function square in my namespace. Then now I want to find the square of every number. Now, what we'll have done earlier when we talked about list comprehension is to, um, is to actually use a loop. Okay, have a loop inside the list. Okay, open a list and say and loop and say x for x in this square it. You see there I'm using both a for loop and a conditional if statement, right? Now, the idea of these built-in functions is that it helps to increase your computational efficiency. In other words, when you use a for loop and an if condition, of course, you expect the program to run very slowly, especially when you are iterating through very large um, uh, 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 size of object. So, but the map function is comes in here because it's quite efficient, very fast. So how do we do that? We have our numbers, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's a list. And now, mind you, we said that you can map a list, you can map a tuple, you can map a dictionary. Okay, you can map any other object as long as that object is an iterable. We have talked about what an iterable is in our previous video. If you don't, if you have not watched that video, just go through the playlist. You will see where we talked about iterables when we're talking about in our first four videos. Okay, where we talked about data types and the rest, we talked about iterables, and I still laid emphasis on it when we talked about Python data structure when we looked at the list, the tuples, and dictionaries. So I'll simply call square numbers, okay, and assign map. Now it takes a function first because it takes the function you want to map to the iterable. So I want to find the squares of all the numbers. So I map square to numbers. So doing that is just to put in this map square to numbers, and I print square of numbers. And you see inside the print function, I use them in apostrophe, a slash, and followed by an n. What that means is what now is to print the numbers on the next line. In other words, print as you're print it on the next line. That's what that means. So let's run this cell. After doing that, like I told you, whenever you use all these built-in functions, the lambda, the map, the filter, the zip, all they give you first is what now it gives you the map object. Okay, it gives us the map object, which is the expression. So the object does gives us the mapped sequence itself. So what we need to do is to now to call it as a list. You can do it in two ways. You can call a list on it, and then you can iterate through that map object. In other words, you can use a for loop and say for this in map of this, print this. So you are looking through it. Okay. You can also use Python, iter, and nest. We'll look at that in our next video. That's also another video I'm going to dedicate to talk about those the iter, those special lazy iterable precisely. We'll talk about lazy iterable. So here I would print a list of the square of numbers. If you run this, what you have is see, first of all, the first one I printed, print square of numbers, and I put a next line there, you can see that what do I have? It gives me a map object and then leaves a space. I want it to leave a space. It leaves a prints a space and then prints the list of squared numbers. So you can call list of square number directly on this map or call it on the mapped object, which is squared numbers is a mapped object. So it gives us this. Let's look at the next example before we talk about filter. Here I want to capitalize every word. So I have uppercase word. The input argument is word. So it returns the word in uppercase. Okay, and that should return word dot upper. Okay, dot upper dot upper is actually a method in string because the word itself is a string. We have different methods in strings. We have the upper, you have the lower, you have the title, you have the cap case, and a lot of method. But the method I want to use is the upper method. So you notice here in this case that what I have, the words are dictionary. So the first key is one, and the word is hello world. Second key two, goodbye moon. Third key, welcome to the sun, like that. So, and then I'll call cap words instead of using a loop here, because I can actually do it using a loop here. So I will simply call cap word and I'll map the function uppercase. In other words, for every words, okay, in that words, simply return them as uppercase in cap words. So I'll put in the function, like I said, it takes the function first and then it takes the iterable. In this case, the iterable here is the values of that dictionary. So we'll call word dot values. Okay. If we need the values in the dictionary, that's what we want to capitalize. You call dot values, not dot items. Items gives us both the key, a tuple of the key and the value, but we need just the values. If you want the key, you call word.keys, but we don't need the keys, so we need the values. So it's called word.values. And then we can print the list of cap words. So if you run this again, you see hello world, goodbye moon, welcome to the sun. It gives you a list. So it returns a value, which in other words, it returns a list because I've called the list on the mapped object. The next we'll talk about is a filter. The filter function is a built-in function in Python that allows you to filter an iterable based on a certain condition. Okay, so it's like a conditional. Okay, using filtering an iterable based on a pattern certain condition. Remember, we have used it earlier when we talked about the lambda function. That's where I want to give more detailed explanation to what happened earlier in that example. So the iterable can be a list, a tuple, string, or any other iterable object. Filter takes two arguments. The first argument is a function, okay, that takes one element of the iterable as input and returns a Boolean value. It returns a Boolean. Kindly note the differences. Here it returns a Boolean, either a true or a false. The second argument is the iterable object that you want to filter. Now, in this case here, I will give an example. This is a code snippet of is even. I want to check if any number is even. So I said is even, it takes input num, returns true if the number is even, otherwise false. In other words, if it is odd, it returns false. So then the function returns num modulo 2 equals 0. In other words, this function returns even. So if the number modulo 2 is not 0, then it will return false. Let's see that. So I come here and define my function like I've given the code snippet. Then I will create a number. Now here, instead of writing the number out, I just want to call a list on range on the range function. The range function takes a range of numbers starting from 1 until 1 less than the stopping value. So until 20 inclusive, until 20 inclusive, but not until 21. So if you want to see that here, we can print the number. So I call a list of numbers. If I run this cell, can you see it prints the number 1 until 20? That's what it is. So I called, if I have just only a range there, it gives me just the range object. Okay. So I'll call a list on it to have that list. So now here I want to filter to check if the numbers are even, right? To filter even numbers. So I say even numbers equals list. Mind you, each time we call these built-in functions, they give us the object. Filter Then putting the function is even, right? Is even should take what now? Should take an input. So what is that input taking? That's what will supply the numbers. So filter these numbers, you know, based on the condition defined in the function. If you actually want to do this using the normal conditionals and the control loop in Python, it takes time, it's slow, but the filter function does this effectively well. We have seen examples of that in our previous video. So if I put in this and then I call the list on it already on the filter object, so it should give me, let's print even numbers. If you print even numbers, it has filtered out even numbers. When numbers are true, it picked them up 2, 4, 6. Same, you can define odd numbers. You see um, what it does. Here I showed the example that if you just call filter on its even and numbers, I put in a comment, don't do this as it returns an object, okay? The filter object. If you run this and print, what it gives you is just a filter object. So you need to call a list on the even numbers to get the list or of the returned value. Okay, the last here is the zip function. The zip function in Python, okay, uh, the zip function in Python, what it simply does is that what now? It takes iterables and returns an iterator of tuples. Now, the tuples contain elements from the iterables that are paired together based on their position. The zip function is very, very, very useful when you have two objects and you want to map them position for position. Okay, map the values position for position. So I will give an example here, and you will see us use this subsequently in most of our coding practices. So we'll show examples of that. Here I have a letter which is a list of insipidus. Okay, the I called a list on it. So I want to make a list of that letter. Right, the total length is 10. So there I call a number and also get a list of. So I have letters and numbers, same length. Mind you, you cannot zip two objects of different size. They have to be of the same size. So now I want zip out letters, numbers will now be zip, letters, and numbers. Okay. So let's see that example here. In this case, I'm using now letters equals list of Gotham 5, and then I call numbers. Okay, also have 5 length, and I call zip of letters and numbers. Let's run this cell and see what we have. If I run it, see it maps every element in letters and numbers index for index. Okay, so zip can be used to create dictionaries. Okay, for example, here we have letters equals list helpful, and then helpful is a total of 8 elements. So I create a list of what? Sorry, 7 elements. I create a list of 7 elements, 1 until 8. So it takes 1 until 7. Then I can do what? Zip letters and numbers. After zipping it, I call a dictionary on it. Okay, if I call a dictionary, I need to see what happens there. It picks what first of all the letters as keys and then the numbers as values. Okay, so let's run this and see what we have. If I run it, see it picks the letters helpful as keys and the values. So it has zipped them, but I can convert it to a dictionary by calling a dic. Okay, dic function on it. Okay, dic is also what now? Built-in Python built-in function. So call it on it, it's converted to dictionary. All of this is giving us a guide on how we can easily manipulate most of our objects when we're in our codes, when we have to deal with writing, reading files, doing some numeric or manipulation or mathematical operation, and then writing out the result. We need to know how to effectively use this and make it faster. The last example, but not the least, is to show you an example here that you can zip more than 2 objects. You can zip up to as many objects as possible. You can zip 20 objects. You can zip 30 objects as long as they have the same length. Here we have names. There is a list of Anne, Fish, Bar, and Gotham. Then we have scores, okay, which is a list of the scores. And then we have courses, which is a list of the courses, individual courses, all of the same what? The same elements. Number of elements is 4. So here I can simply call zip. Here I want to zip the name of the students, the scores, and the courses. Okay. If I zip this alone and stop here, for example, if I simply comment this out and comment this out, right? And okay, let's leave the first one and print student. Run this cell now. What it gives you is zip object. That's like I told you. The filter, the lambda, the map, the zip always give you an object. So to get the item in that object, I can call list on it. So list of students is zips. Can you see it has zipped a tuple of 3 elements: the student's name, the score, and the subject. Index for index. What I mean, position for position. So this is very effective. If you want to use a loop for this, definitely you will have to call about 2 loops and with some conditional, and it's quite messy. But this is faster and efficient and more cleaner and readable. You can loop through the zipped object and print every item. So what we are saying here is that earlier we didn't call a list on the zipped object. So once we have the zipped object, like I told you, you can look through it. Likewise, you can look through a filter object. You can look through what's it called? You can look through a mapped object. Okay, any object can be looked through. Okay, because an iterator, so you can look through it. So here we'll now say for name, score, and course in students, because student is a zipped object of name, score, and course. What should we do? We should print. I use an F string here. Name, had, score. In I want the name of the student, the score they had, and in which subject. So if I run this, what do we have? You see, and then you see the essence of this. My forward slash n here is to put them to create an empty line in between the printed value. So you see, Anne had 60 in French, Fish had 56 in physics, Brad had 87 in mathematics, and Gotham had 76 in history. If you see it's look at the tuple, you can also look through it, just looking at tuple and printing out the result. With this, we have come to the end of today's lecture. If you have any question, or having any ambiguity on what we have talked about concerning these built-in functions, leave it in the comment section. I will attend to your question. Also, if you are watching my video, please share this video, give it a thumbs up, and subscribe to my channel if you have not done so. And please do not forget to click the notification button to get notified of my new upload. Until then, I will see you in my next video.